I never saw it coming. My cousin Max pulled me aside at our family reunion, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "I need to tell you something. This changes everything." I had no idea what was about to hit me. What he said next completely shook me to my core. It wasn't just a secret. It was a truth that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. It was supposed to be the perfect family reunion, the kind we all looked forward to every year. The sun was out, and the air smelled like fresh barbecue and laughter. I could hear my nieces and nephews running around, the soft hum of chatter mixing with the clinking of glasses and the crackling of the grill. It was supposed to be the one time we all came together, laughing, reminiscing about old times, and just enjoying each other's company. I was there with my mom, my dad, my little sister Emily, and my brother Ben. Mom and Dad were the glue that held our family together, always organizing these gatherings to make sure we stayed connected. Everything felt so normal, too normal almost. I was just walking around, chatting with everyone, trying to soak in the moments before the day ended. But there was a strange feeling tugging at me, something I couldn't explain, like something was about to happen, but I didn't know what. Max was there, of course. He was always the one who brought a little chaos to the party, the one who was always a bit mysterious, like he was hiding something just behind that grin of his. He was my older cousin, the kind of guy who was always quick with a joke or a story. But today, there was something different about him. He seemed a little off. He kept glancing around, his face tight with worry. I noticed it, but didn't think much of it at the time. The afternoon slipped by, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. It wasn't until later, when most of the family was gathered around for the group photo, that Max finally grabbed me by the arm and said in a low voice, "We need to talk." I tried to brush him off, thinking it was nothing serious. "What's up?" I asked, my smile barely hiding the curiosity building inside me. He looked at me with a mix of urgency and fear. "No, Sam, you need to hear this. It can't wait." And in that moment, I knew something was coming, something I wasn't prepared for. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "What is it?" I asked, my voice quiet, unsure of what to expect. Max stepped back and said the words that would forever change everything. "This changes everything, Sam. What I'm about to tell you will blow your mind." I didn't know it then, but those words were only the beginning. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As Max pulled me aside, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I knew Max. We grew up together, spent countless summers at our grandparents' house, shared secrets, and laughed over silly jokes only we would understand. But there was something in the way he was looking at me now. Something wasn't right. His usual playful energy was gone, replaced by an intensity that made my heart race. Max never liked to talk about serious things. He was the cousin who always made light of everything, who would crack a joke just to get a laugh or deflect any conversation that started getting too real. But now, there he was, his face tight with worry, his eyes darting around like he was making sure no one else could hear us. My palms started to sweat. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I couldn't tell if I was nervous, scared, or just plain confused. "Sam, I need to tell you something," Max said, his voice shaking just a little. I tried to smile, but the smile didn't quite reach my eyes. "Sure, Max. What's going on?" I said, trying to play it cool. Though my heart was starting to beat faster, I felt like there was something heavy pressing down on my chest, but I didn't know why. Max didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around again, his gaze darting nervously. "This can't wait. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but it's time you knew." His words were careful, measured, like he was walking on eggshells, and that made my unease grow. "Sam, this is big. It's about your family." I felt my chest tighten, my breath hitching slightly. "What do you mean, about my family?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My thoughts raced as I tried to make sense of his words. What could possibly be so urgent, so important that Max was acting this way? Max took a deep breath, like he was gathering courage for something that he knew would shake me to my core. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable, then looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Sam, I found out something about your dad. He's not your real father." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was like the air had been knocked out of me. For a moment, everything around me went quiet. I stared at Max, trying to process what he'd just said. But the words didn't seem to make sense. It felt like I was hearing them through water, distant and muffled, as though the reality of what was happening was just out of reach. What? I finally managed to breathe out, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about? My dad? Not my real father?" I felt a rush of disbelief flood over me, pushing the air out of my lungs. I wanted to laugh, to ask him if he was joking, but something in Max's face told me he wasn't. He nodded, his face grim. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but it's the truth. I found out when I was going through some old family records with my mom. Sam, I swear this isn't some prank. It's real." I felt a wave of confusion and shock crash over me. My mind couldn't process it. Max was talking about my father, the man I'd known my entire life as my dad, the man who raised me, loved me, and gave me everything I needed. He was the one who had been there for me during every major moment of my life. How could this be true? But that doesn't make sense, I stammered, my voice shaking with the effort to understand. "I've known my dad my whole life. He's always been there for me. I don't understand what you mean." Max took another step closer, lowering his voice as though he was afraid someone might overhear. "I know this is hard to believe. Trust me, I didn't want to find out this way either. But Sam, the truth is, your dad isn't your biological father. Someone else is. And it changes everything. You deserve to know." I could feel my world starting to tilt. All the solid ground beneath me felt like it was slipping away. My thoughts started to spiral out of control. Was I some kind of mistake? How could this happen? Who was my real father? And why was this kept from me? My mind raced through all the moments I had spent with my dad, the family vacations, the quiet talks, the times I leaned on him for advice. Was it all a lie? How could I even begin to process this? And more than that, why had Max waited until now to tell me? Why had this secret been hidden for so long? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I just stood there, feeling numb. The words, "Your dad isn't your real father," kept repeating in my mind, but they didn't seem to make sense. They didn't belong in the world I knew. The truth, whatever it was, had shattered the reality I had always taken for granted. Max's face softened, his voice quieter now. "I'm sorry, Sam, I really am. But you need to talk to your parents. They should be the ones to tell you the whole story." I couldn't breathe. The ground beneath me felt unsteady, like I might fall at any moment. I had no idea what to do next. But one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The words Max had just said kept echoing in my mind, louder and louder, until I thought I might lose my grip on reality. I wasn't sure if I could believe him. It felt impossible, like a bad dream I was struggling to wake up from. But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. This wasn't a prank or some kind of twisted game. Max had just dropped a bombshell, and my world was crumbling beneath me. "Sam, you need to talk to your parents," Max said again, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I'm not the one who should tell you everything, but you deserve to know the truth." I felt like I was drowning. There was a heavy weight pressing on my chest, making it hard to breathe. My father wasn't my biological father. That fact seemed so surreal, I could hardly process it. My heart pounded in my ears as I stood there, frozen, not sure what to do next. I had spent my entire life with this man, my dad. He had been there for every important moment, every birthday, every family, holiday. He was the one who taught me how to drive, the one who stayed up late with me when I had my first broken heart. He was everything to me. And now, everything I thought I knew about him, about us, was in question. The more I thought about it, the more my mind raced. Who was my real father? Why had my parents kept this from me? Was my life a lie? I didn't have answers, and it scared me to death. What was I supposed to do with this information? How could I even begin to process something so massive? My whole identity felt like it was built on a lie. My father, the man who had raised me, wasn't really my father at all. Max's words still hung in the air like a thick fog, and for a moment, I didn't know where to turn. Part of me wanted to run away, to pretend none of this was real, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I couldn't just ignore the truth. I needed to understand what had happened, what this meant for me, and more importantly, I needed to hear it from my parents. I could feel the tears starting to well up in my eyes. I didn't want to cry, not in front of Max, not in front of anyone, but I was on the verge of breaking. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, confusion, betrayal. How could they keep something like this from me? I felt so many emotions rushing through me, but the strongest one was hurt. I had trusted my parents with everything, and now I was questioning the one thing I had always taken for granted: my family. I wiped my face quickly, trying to stop the tears before they fell. Max saw the pain in my eyes, and his expression softened. "I know this is a lot to take in, Sam," he said gently, "but I'm here for you. You don't have to go through this alone." I nodded, but even his comfort couldn't settle the storm inside me. I needed answers. I couldn't just sit around and let this confusion eat me alive. I had to confront my parents. I had to know the truth. Without another word, I turned away from Max, my feet carrying me toward the house. I felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything seemed distant, like I was moving in slow motion. My legs felt weak, like I might collapse at any moment, but I pushed forward. I had to talk to them. I couldn't let this secret fester any longer. When I reached the door, my hands trembled as I reached for the handle. I stopped for a second, staring at the door as if I was about to walk into a war zone. I felt my heart in my throat, my mind spinning. Was I ready for this? Could I handle the truth? Could I handle the consequences of whatever I was about to hear? I took a deep breath and opened the door. The sound of laughter from the kitchen drifted into the hallway, but it felt so distant now, so foreign. Everything felt off. My dad was there, talking with my uncle. He looked up as I entered, a smile on his face, but it quickly faded when he saw the expression on mine. He could tell something was wrong. "Sam, what's going on?" he asked, his voice full of concern. The smile that had once felt so comforting now felt out of place, like it didn't belong. I stood there for a moment, struggling to find my words. The truth was heavy in my chest, like a stone lodged there, making it hard to speak. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I forced the words out. "Dad, is it true? Are you my real father?" The question hung in the air, heavy and sharp, cutting through the silence. The room went still as I waited for his response. My heart was beating so loudly in my ears I thought it might burst. This was it, the moment that would change everything. He didn't answer right away. Instead, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Guilt? Sorrow? Maybe both. He looked at me for a long time before he finally spoke. "Sam, I've been waiting for this moment. I never wanted to hurt you. But yes, I'm not your biological father. But I love you with everything I have. You've always been my daughter, no matter what." And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down. I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of my father's words sinking into me with a force I could barely comprehend. The room felt like it was closing in, the air thick with unspoken emotions and truths that had been buried for so long. My world was tilting, and I didn't know if I could stay upright. The floor beneath me seemed so unstable, as if everything I had known was now shifting beneath my feet. For a moment, I couldn't even move. I just stood there, frozen, staring at my father as the reality of his confession began to hit me. He wasn't my biological father. How had I never known? My whole life had been built on this man's love, his care, his dedication to me, and now I was being told that none of it was real. At least, not in the way I had always believed. Dad, why didn't you tell me? I finally found my voice, but it came out shaky, weak, as though I was standing on the edge of a cliff, afraid I might fall. Why did you keep this from me? He seemed to falter at the question, like he was struggling to find the right words. His gaze dropped to the floor for a moment before he looked back up at me, his eyes full of a mixture of sadness and regret. Sam, I never wanted to hurt you, he began, his voice low and careful. When your mom and I decided to raise you, we wanted you to have a life filled with love and security. We thought that was the most important thing, and we didn't want you to feel any different. You were our daughter, no matter what. His eyes welled up with tears, and it hit me harder than anything. This wasn't easy for him either. We made a choice. We chose to love you, Sam, and I didn't want you to feel like you weren't my daughter because you were. You still are. I wanted to believe him. I really did, but the truth was hard to swallow. Everything that had felt so solid, so certain, was now crumbling around me. My father, the man who had been my rock, who had given me everything I needed and more, wasn't even my biological father. And yet, his words, his sincerity, reminded me of how much he truly loved me. Still, it didn't take away the sting of betrayal that gnawed at me. I didn't know who to be angry at, Max for revealing this to me, or my parents for keeping such a monumental secret. What happened? I asked, my voice hoarse. Who is my real father? The question was almost too hard to ask, but I needed to know. The hole in my chest felt deeper with every second that passed without an answer. My dad exhaled deeply, then slowly started to speak again. Your biological father was a man who wasn't part of our lives. He and your mom were together a long time ago, but their relationship wasn't meant to last. Your mom and I met after that. She didn't want you to grow up without a father. She didn't want you to have to deal with the pain of feeling abandoned. So I stepped in, and I loved you from the very first day I met you. You were my daughter from the moment I saw you. I felt tears start to fill my eyes, but I fought them back. I wasn't sure what to feel anymore. Part of me was devastated by the fact that my whole life was based on a lie. Another part of me, the part that loved my dad more than anything, was filled with a bittersweet kind of relief. He was my dad. He had always been my dad, and nothing could change the love we had for each other. But it didn't make the truth any easier to face. I didn't want to tell you, he said quietly, as if his words could somehow heal the pain. I didn't think you needed to know. I thought you were better off without it. And I didn't want to hurt you, Sam, but I should have told you sooner. You deserve to know the truth. I nodded slowly, though my heart felt like it was shattering inside my chest. I didn't know what to say. And Max? I asked. How did he find out? Max. He's the one who pushed me to tell you in the end. He found out by accident when he was going through some old family records. He didn't know how to handle it. And I don't blame him for coming to you. But Sam, I swear, you've always been my daughter in every way that matters. I raised you, I loved you, and I always will. My father stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me in a tight hug. For a moment, I allowed myself to sink into his embrace, to feel the warmth of his love and the undeniable truth that he had always been there for me, even if the circumstances were different than I had thought. He was still the same man who had held me when I was scared, who had supported me when I failed, and who had celebrated every achievement I'd ever had. None of that changed. I love you, Sam, he whispered. Nothing, not even this, can change that. As I stood there in his arms, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew this. The love between us had always been real, the truth had been buried, but it couldn't take that away. The fact that my dad wasn't my biological father didn't matter anymore. The bond we shared, the moments we had lived together, that was what truly defined our relationship. And that was something nothing at all, could ever take from us. It wasn't the answer I had wanted, but in a strange way, it was the one I needed. I finally understood that the truth wasn't always easy to bear, but it didn't have to destroy what really mattered. The days that followed the revelation were some of the hardest of my life. I thought that once I confronted my dad and heard the truth, I would somehow feel a sense of relief, but instead, I was left with a confusing mix of emotions: grief, anger, sadness, but also a strange kind of clarity. The truth had torn apart the world I had known, but in its place, something new began to take shape, something real, though perhaps different from what I had imagined. I spent a lot of time in the days after the revelation, reflecting on everything: my childhood, my relationship with my parents, and my memories with my dad. I realized how deeply I had always trusted him, how much I had leaned on him for everything in my life. And despite the shock and hurt that came with learning the truth, I also knew one thing with certainty: the love my father had for me was unwavering. That love wasn't based on blood. It was based on years of shared experiences, laughter, and even hardship. It was the kind of love that made someone willing to step into the role of father, to raise a child as their own, and to offer them everything they had, even when the world around them was telling them it wasn't official. To me, that was the truest form of love. But the truth also forced me to look at the reality of my relationship with my mother. She had known all along, and she had kept this secret from me for so many years. It wasn't just the fact that she had kept it from me. It was the way she had decided that I didn't need to know. She had chosen to protect me from the truth, thinking it would hurt less to let me believe something that wasn't true. But the thing was, the longer I lived in ignorance, the more that secret began to take its toll. It wasn't just a matter of finding out that my dad wasn't my biological father. It was the weight of knowing that my own mother had kept such an important piece of my identity hidden from me. When I finally confronted her about it, there was no dramatic confrontation or shouting match. Instead, there was silence. She sat across from me in the living room, her hands trembling as she tried to find the right words. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the burden she had been carrying for all those years. She explained how, in her mind, protecting me from this truth was the right thing to do. She didn't want me to grow up with the pain of knowing the truth about my biological father. She didn't want me to feel abandoned or rejected, as she feared I might. She had always feared that knowing the truth would somehow change the way I saw my dad, the man who had raised me, and in some ways, she was right. The truth had shaken me to my core, but it had also forced me to understand the complexity of love and family in ways I hadn't before. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but eventually, I was able to find peace with my mother. I realized that she had only wanted to protect me, even if her method wasn't the right one. And I also realized that her keeping this secret didn't mean she didn't love me. In fact, it was her love that had driven her to make this decision in the first place. It wasn't the kind of love I had expected, but it was the kind of love I needed to understand, even if it was complicated. As for Max, I knew that his decision to reveal the truth to me had been a difficult one. It wasn't easy to break a secret like that, especially when it meant potentially destroying the peace of our entire family. But I also understood why he did it. He had never meant to hurt me. He was just trying to make sure that I knew the truth, because no matter how painful it was still the truth. And the truth, as hard as it was to swallow, was what I needed. I didn't agree with how he handled it at first, but I understood his motives. Over time, I found a new understanding of what family really meant. It wasn't about bloodlines or genetics. It was about the people who loved and cared for you, the ones who supported you, even when they didn't have to. My dad had been there for me in ways that went beyond biology. He had given me everything, from his time and attention to his unwavering belief in me. That kind of bond couldn't be broken by a biological fact. It wasn't the blood that made him my father. It was the years we spent together, the love and dedication he'd shown me. And that was something that would never change. But the most important lesson I learned through all of this was the power of honesty. The truth, while painful, had set me free. It was hard to face, but in the end, it allowed me to grow, to understand my family in a deeper way, and to see the love we shared from a new perspective. I realized that we can't always protect the people we love from the harsh realities of life. Sometimes, the truth is painful, but it is also the only thing that can truly bring us closer together. And it is only through facing those difficult truths that we can heal, grow, and ultimately become stronger. In the end, the secret that had been kept from me for so long didn't destroy my family. It made us stronger. It didn't change the love I had for my dad or the bond we shared. It didn't erase the years of memories or the deep connection we had built. It simply made me realize that love isn't about perfection or the absence of secrets. It's about the strength to face the truth, no matter how difficult it may be, and the willingness to love even when things are imperfect. I am who I am because of the love I received, not because of blood. And that's a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life.